Good afternoon, everyone, and wonderful to be with you for our live taping of the Power Play podcast. And there's certainly quite a lot of power play going on here at the convention.
Yes.
See what we did there. With me, Senator Tammy Duckworth. Many of you will already know, and our audience across the Atlantic might like to get to know a bit better through this conversation. Senator, thank you very much for spending time with us today. Give me your insight on how you see the mood, because it seems to me that delegates, senior party figures, the crowds that we're meeting, exuberant, so really rocking it. They're loving everything that's happening in the hall. If you move outside, of course, you have protests going on, and some of them have a quite bitter undertone, talking about genocide Joe, killer Kamala, etc. Do you think that the situation in the Middle East, and particularly in Gaza, is one that is still haunting the party, particularly if there is no lasting ceasefire before we get to the election?
Well, I think it's an issue that's haunting all of us. I don't know how we cannot be haunted by the death of innocent civilians and the suffering that's going on, and the fact that we still have hostages who are not returned to their families. And in fact, I don't think people realize, but 10 of the hostages had Illinois connections. So I've been very deeply involved in tracking their well-being. But I will say that the atmosphere outside the convention is also equally hopeful, especially among young people. The number of young folks who have become re-energized and are organizing, mobilizing, ready to get out and knock on doors. These are the same people who maybe were staying home because of Gaza and the war, and now I think are now remobilized and are willing to come out and organize.
That is also a demographic where there is a strong feeling, often a critical feeling about the conduct of Israel in Gaza, and there is a fear, and we've seen it impact the British election campaign recently, that can lose support right in those groups who might otherwise be enthused, as you describe it, by Kamala Harris and Tim Walz.
Well, they're coming back because of Kamala and Tim. I think we started to lose them there during prior to President Biden stepping aside, but I see them coming back, and that's just, it's anecdotal for me because it's who's reaching out to me, but frankly, the number of groups and young Democrat groups that are stepping up, our Asian American young leaders are stepping up, and so I actually see it as more hopeful, as more people are coming back, precisely because Kamala is our nominee.
Do you see the policy changing, though? I think you've said that your own experience serving the country and paying the price of very serious injuries in Iraq, that is kind of changing, and that will demand more changes perhaps from an incoming Harris-Walz administration, because that sense of loyalty through thick and thin to Israel is probably a bit more contested than it was in the party.
Well, I think you've seen President Biden speak up pretty strongly, criticizing Netanyahu with the very poor decisions that he has made, and we've certainly sent very strong messages to the Israelis, and so I think that will continue and be even stronger in the Kamala's administration. But hopefully, I saw the president, spoke with him personally when he came in, and on Friday in the Oval Office. We are very close to a deal. We're going to continue to pursue that deal to get what we need, which is a ceasefire on both sides, as well as really pushing to get more humanitarian aid into Gaza.
Another topic, maybe not one that I expected so much when I arrived in Chicago, but which has just burst through the news agenda, is this argument about IVF and the moral political status of IVF. Now, you spoke movingly from the stage about having your own children with the assistance of IVF, and you said your struggle with infertility was more painful than any wound that you earned on the battlefield. And in your case, that's a very considerable sacrifice that you made. The only question I would have about it is, it feels a little bit like a dividing line, and does it really work as simply as perhaps intended, given that Donald Trump has said, despite that controversial Alabama Supreme Court ruling, that IVF was frozen embryos in IVF treatments were children, which obviously opened a lot of questions. But Donald Trump said that he supported IVF, so I wonder if you think it's particularly important to make that difference.
Let's make it clear, Donald Trump says a lot of things that he doesn't mean. He is a known liar, And so let's just look at what he has done and what he has taken credit for. And he's taken credit for the Supreme Court and the Dobbs decision. And frankly, he has done nothing to help restore IVF to these states that have come up with these personhood laws. And until you get to the fundamental issue, which is states that have declared that a fertilized egg is a human being with equal rights to the woman that would carry that fertilized egg, you are now making it so that you cannot practice IVF. When a fertilized egg is equal to the woman and has personhood rights, now those fertility doctors are potentially committing manslaughter or even murder when they do things like discard a non-viable egg. And so Donald Trump says a lot of stuff, but let's see what he has taken credit for and what is happening in the states. And he has done nothing to help stop the rise of these personhood laws, which is fundamentally the issue with IVF.
But what it's also opened up, and we've seen it in the Tim Walz case, is that then people give comments about it, as he did, where he sort of appeared to suggest that...
Well, he said fertility treatment and IUIs, which is on the step to IVF. So there are many things with fertility treatments from, as I went through, you're given medication that helps your body produce more eggs. And then you're giving medication that help your body produce more eggs, and the injections of hormones. And then you do IUI. I had 5 failed cycles of IUI. This is all fertility treatments. And many people are opposed to IUI as well. And then the last resort is IVF. And Tim was, they've said that they had fertility treatments, and that's how he has his children. And frankly, this is part of people not understanding how difficult this process is.
Just sort of just stitch that question, which was really that it ended up in an argument about whether he'd suggested that he and his wife had IVF or IUI, another...
Right, he said fertility treatments.
Right. So, but I suppose what I'm suggesting is it does embroil politicians in this kind of detail, which is very personal and must be also very, very tricky sometimes for them and their families. So that I wondered whether you think it's also a good idea to open up the sort of moral mazes, if you like, when they are also extremely personal.
I think it's very good. I think that Republicans, in going after personhood amendments, in this frenetic desire to take away women's right to make choices about their own bodies and claiming that a fertilized egg is a human being, open up a can of worms, because I don't think people realize how much fertility treatments are part of everyday life for so many Americans. I think it's where breast cancer was in the 60s, because people were suffering from breast cancer, but people didn't know it because it was very deeply personal and almost shameful for people in a way. And we shamed women for saying that, you had breast cancer. People didn't talk about it. And it was only when we started talking about, I am suffering from breast cancer, and it became a part of normal conversation that people realized, oh my gosh, it touches my life and it touches many lives. Same thing with fertility treatments. I don't think people realize how widespread fertility treatments are and how much it touches every family. And when this happened, I think Republicans...
Do you think voters are going to wake up to that as a result?
Yes, because the number of people come to me, it's like half of my grandchildren are from fertility treatments. And so now you see the Republican Party trying to backtrack, but they can't backtrack until they get to the fundamental issue of personhood for a fertilized egg. And they're not willing to do that.
Now, talking of Donald Trump, and he does still seem to cast quite sort of psychological thrall over the convention. Do you sometimes think...
No, we just like to beat up on him. No, there's no psychological thrall here. This is just about us saying, this guy is terrible and he doesn't belong to be the leader of the greatest democracy in the free world, and we're going to tell you why.
Well, that was actually what I was going to come to, because you've castigated his remarks about military veterans, suggesting the highest civilian award is more prestigious than the Medal of Honor awarded to service members who've demonstrated conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity, which in your case is certainly the case.
Well, I am not a recipient of Medal of Honor.
No, sorry, but you are a recipient, a decorated war veteran for your efforts. Was really a point. You said that he was despicable for those comments, doesn't deserve to be Commander-in-Chief. Why do you think that his polling with veterans and with servicemen and women seems to still be pretty robust? I think around the 60%, some would put it higher. Can you explain that?
I think it's falling. I mean, when the VFW and the head of VFW came out and criticize him, I think this shows that this is the kind of thing where his support among the military, which tends to be more conservative, is falling. And people need to realize that the military is changing. Gen X, my generation, are now the highest ranking and on our way out. What you have in the military now are millennials who are now in mid and upper levels, and Gen Y coming in at the lower ranks. So you now have a military that has only ever served when women were able to serve in combat. They've only ever served when there was diversity and the ability to serve openly if you are LGBTQ. And you're seeing the demographics change in the military, and you're seeing a desperation within Republicans to try to reclaim that aspect. But you cannot be the party of patriotism if you think that the people who serve in uniform are suckers and losers.
Do you think that will impact this election, or is your prediction that that takes a lot longer to fall? If you like
I damn well am going to do everything I can to make sure that it takes effect this election and make it clear that a 5-time draft-dodging coward does not belong in the Oval Office.
You were very quick to defend Tim Walz's military record against criticism from J.D. Vance, who's an Iraq war veteran himself. Those claims about deployment and his retirement from the National Guard. Isn't it fair? I mean, this is a bit of a provocation to you, but isn't it fair for opponents to raise questions about any perceived incongruities or inaccuracies as they see them?
You know, Sergeant Major Walz was deployed, but he was deployed to the European theater as opposed to directly into Afghanistan. But it was in support of Afghanistan. But let me make it clear, the people who are attacking him are attacking him because this is his strong point. This is the Rumsfeld doctrine. You take the thing in your opponent that is his greatest strength and that you are most afraid of, and you attack that and try to tear it down. So that's all the Republicans are doing. Today they put out, I think, a letter signed by over 24 Republican members who are veterans, and I think over 24 of them, they identified them as being retired when they actually are not retired. So they have some issues there with that statement. And they even called Ronnie Jackson an admiral when he was demoted. So if you talk about stolen valor, let's go talk to Ronnie Jackson about calling himself an admiral when he was actually stripped of that rank.
Can you see America ever going into the kind of warfare where you served in Iraq, you know the Afghanistan theatre very well? Of course, there's support for Ukraine that's been very strongly underlined by the administration. But you know, if you're honest and you look back to the times of the great American military interventions, do you think they're over and that an incoming administration could ever go back to having American boots on the ground, helicopters in the air, the rest of it?
Well, I think that we need to make clear that our leadership is still vitally needed. Part of what we need to do, and my support for the Ukrainian people, as heroic as they are, as important as Ukrainian freedom and liberty is, I'm not interested in supporting Ukraine because I admire their patriotism and their willingness to fight. I want to support Ukraine because I don't want Russia to take over Ukraine and then look to the rest of Europe, at which point Article 5 of NATO is invoked, which means now you have US troops boots on the ground. So it is really important for America's national security to support Ukrainian freedom and independence because it is about not having to send American troops overseas.
But whether it was connected to the Ukraine crisis, South China Sea or elsewhere, could you actually see anything like the interventions, which in the end, and a lot of people didn't think achieved what they set out to achieve, became very politically divisive, and which perhaps a new Democrat president in the White House might well face challenges where there will be a division about what America's role will be?
If Article 5 of NATO is invoked, we will be there. Illinois has been in a 35-year training relationship with Poland. Poland will be on the front line should Ukraine fall. You can expect to have Illinois National Guardsmen on the ground in Poland. In fact, we already have some there.
We went this far without the word Illinois, but you got there.
The great state of Illinois, let's say that.
The great state of Illinois. As I now know, I must always refer to it in every interview that I do here, on pain of never being invited back here again. Let's look into the campaign. Many voters tuning in, that first big national and international look at Kamala Harris. You know, and this is something we really want to focus on in this podcast, is the impact of this far beyond America as well as in it. What do you think she now needs to do to convince swing voters that she's the right choice, she's the safe choice, but more than that, that energy, I think it was Congressman Clyburn who said energy is one thing, but it needs to be harnessed, it needs to be targeted. Targeted at what? Harnessed?
The middle class. Targeted at the middle class, at working families, at making sure that the people in America who have to get up and earn that paycheck, who are still paying mortgages, who don't know how they're going to retire, how they're going to be able to pay for their prescription medicine, how they're going to pay for their children's college, that those people feel seen and know that we care about them and that we are going to represent them. You know, Illinois, the great state of Illinois, is 102 counties. About 6 of those are blue and 96 are red. I represent the entire state of Illinois, whether or not those voters vote for me, because they know that I see them. I see their struggles. I see what they are faced with. And that is what Kamala is going to do. Kamala and Tim Walz are going to get out there in America and say, I see your struggles. I see the fact that you are a 10th generation family farm, but you're about to lose that farm. And so that is what she needs to do.
And it's when you then get into the practicalities and the policy choices that supporting the middle class then just becomes becomes a bit harder than just saying you understand people's pain in terms of their pocketbooks and their family budgets. And just before the convention, Kamala Harris suggested a ban on so-called price gouging by food and grocery companies. That seemed to suggest some direct intervention there, but a lot of economists, including Jason Furman, I've interviewed who was in the Obama administration, said this is not a sensible policy. A lot of other economists who are otherwise pretty friendly to the idea of a continuation of the Democrats in power are worried about that idea of interventions on kind of price control, that they either don't work or they have a lot of unforeseen consequences. Your view?
Well, I think the colloquial, when you're speaking to the public, I think what the general public think about price gouging is the fact that pharmaceutical companies continue to make excessive profits at a time when people are struggling the most and are taking advantage of pandemics and the like. I think that the fact that oil companies like ExxonMobil and BP, these guys continue to make record profits and pay very little in taxes. I think those are the things that the average person think of when they think price gouging. Economists, can talk very much about economic policy, and we can get into the depths of that. But I think most people understand that there are unfair practices that are happening, and we need to stop that. The fact that
are you saying that
like
now in food prices there are unfair practices such that it would count as something that the government needs to get involved with in terms of price controls?
I think that we need to discourage some of this. I mean, the fact that you have companies that downsize the amount of cookies in a package and charge you more, that when you go to the store and you buy some, the fact that you buy something that last week cost the same amount to make, but suddenly you're paying more for less. Those are practices that we should be going after.
You disagree with Jason Furman?
Well, I do when it comes to some of these policies, yeah.
Great, we'll get him on power play and maybe we're going to keep this debate going. Look, this has been such an energetic start to the campaign, and I think everyone at the convention has felt that buzz in the air, but we're now heading to perhaps the next big event, once we've heard, of course, from Tim Walz and Kamala Harris, will be that first TV debate. Do you think the campaign's ready for that? The last TV debate certainly had dramatic fallout, didn't it? What do you expect this time?
She's going to kick his butt, and he's going to have to be dragged off the floor out of there because, listen, Kamala and I went into the Senate together, and we campaigned together for 2 years before we were both elected at the same time. I'd be afraid to go up in a debate against her.
We're not afraid of anything, though. A little bit afraid of Kamala Harris.
Well, let me tell you, when I served in the military, they gave me body armor and ammunition. But to go after a prosecutor of Kamala's quality is something that is very daunting.
We both know in 2016, but around in very different capacities, but there was a euphoria about Hillary Clinton, and a lot of people thought she couldn't lose, and she didn't win in the end. Do you think that there are still vulnerabilities that maybe Democrats just don't take on board? And if so, what are they? Have they changed, or are they the same?
We have learned our lesson from 2016. I think we took too many things for granted. I'll give you an example. Hillary lost Wisconsin. And she lost Wisconsin by about 30,000 votes. The black turnout vote in Milwaukee was down by about 35,000 votes. We're not going to let that happen again. We already have folks knocking on doors, getting out there. We had interference from both Russia and the Communist Chinese government in that election that is known with messaging that was happening. We're going after that as well. So we are not giving anything for granted. And then I want to plug in for the AA-NHPI community. Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff will tell you that their victories in Georgia was made possible in large part by the young Asian Americans who turn out and organize for them. And we have been focused very much on AA-NHPIers. They are the 4% margin of victory in so many of these key states like Michigan, like Arizona, like Nevada, and we're going to turn out.
We have a wrap-up question we ask all our guests, and we never let people know beforehand, ladies and gentlemen, what it is going to be. And we'd love to have you, all of you, and the Senator as a Power Play regular listener. Please follow the podcast. And who would you like to hear on it in the hot seat, now that you know what the experience is like? Who could we put on that make you into an avid follower?
I would love to see President Biden.
Yeah, we'd go for that.
I would love to see President Biden. I will tell you that when I was in the Oval Office on just this past Friday, he was energetic and focused on what needed to be done next, and he is almost having the campaign lifted off of him. I really see him as moving into a period where he's going to be very much like Jimmy Carter, a past president who does so much more for the country.
Bittersweet moment for him.
Bittersweet moment, but again, this is a man who loves his country more than he loves his own personal ambition. And I think you're going to see him focus, and I saw a little bit of that in the Oval Office on Friday, where he was talking about getting a peace deal, where he was talking about the cancer moonshot. He was just very energetic, talking about all the things on his agenda for the next 70 plus days he has. But I think he's going to be active beyond his presidency, the way Jimmy Carter was.
And we've got Senator Duckworth involved in the bidding for Joe Biden, people. So let's see if we can bring that one home. Tammy Duckworth, thank you so much for spending time with us on Power Play here in Chicago.
Thanks, it's good to be here.
The great state of Illinois.
Thank you.